Hello everyone and welcome back to our Reloading 101 series. We're going to be wrapping up the series today and discussing the processes of priming your cases, which you've now prepared and sized and cleaned. We're going to be charging the cases with powder after we've primed them, and we're going to be seating the bullets. So it's three relatively straightforward steps. I'm basically going to be running through some tips and tricks of things I've learnt throughout my reloading journey when it comes to, for example, priming cases. What's the best way to do it? Powder charging, what am I using for charging my powder and weighing my powder, and why I like the Lyman Gen 6. And then when it comes to seating bullets, I'm not going to be talking about the actual process of choosing a seating depth for your bullets, because I think that falls more under load development and not under reloading. But I will be talking about the equipment that I'm using and how to adjust your seating dies, because obviously you will need to change your seating depth when you prepare a load for the first time and figure out what your seating depth should be for a start. So you won't look at like the process of testing different seating depth or different powder charges in order to obtain the best accuracy, but we will talk about where you should start. I've already actually done all of this for all these 260 rounds over here, and the same with 22 to 50. I don't want to bore you with all of those, but the 300 Winchester short magnum is yet to be done, and I've got some lovely Hornady ELD-Ms here ready to be used, and I'm going to grab my powder over there, put it in the Lyman Gen 6 and walk you through all of that. But first things first, we need to prime these cases. Now you may notice that the reloading presses, many of them come with a priming tool. I just found with that much leverage on the presses, you end up not being very sensitive to how you are priming. I actually had a few issues early on where I used this Redding press to do my priming, and I actually pressed the primers too far in to the case so that they were recessed in the back of the case head, and every now and again I tried to take a shot and nothing would happen, and the firing pin wasn't actually engaging the primer properly. And then obviously you can not seat the primers deep enough, and then you've got the opposite problem where you can't close your bolt properly. So I switched to, let me see if I can find it here, the Lee, I think it's called the Lee Quick Prime or Auto Prime or something like that. It's a very simple tool. It doesn't cost much, and it allows you to, with your palm, seat the primer in the back of your case and just get a really good feel for how it's done. So I would strongly recommend just getting something like this. Yes, it means an extra piece of equipment, but if you're going to be priming a lot, this is nice and quick and it works very well. But the first thing I have to do is to switch out the shell holder in the priming tool, because it's currently set for the smaller cases of the 260 Remington, 22 to 50. We need to prepare it for the 300 WSN. So with this one, it's really easy. Just pull this down, bring out this tool, and I believe the other one is somewhere around here. So for the 300 Winchester short magnum, we are going to be using CCR 250 primers, which are magnum primers. Make sure that you do research on which primers you should use. Sometimes when you use a ball powder in a rifle cartridge, in a small rifle cartridge, you may need a magnum primer to ignite the ball powder properly. So for example, I was using S341, which is a ball powder in my 22 to 50, and I had to use magnum primers in a 22 to 50 in order to ignite that powder properly. But for the most part, you probably, for smaller cartridges like the 260, 22 to 50, standard primer is fine. And then for magnum primers, you're probably going to need, for magnum cartridges, you're probably going to need a magnum primer. But CCR 250 primers is what we're going to be using. So these come out, and this is a very easy process. We're going to take 50 of them, and we're going to, there, they all fall out. Okay, let's try this again. Take 50 of them. We're going to empty them out onto this tool, like so. There you go. Shake them around so that they all face the right way. Lock that up. And when you're doing this, you're going to want to face this away from you. So in the event of a primer going off, you don't get anything blowing into your eyes. I'm always cautious about stuff like this. It probably won't hurt you, but if you're facing it towards yourself, you can do damage to your eyes. So we're going to go through each of these, and I can feel exactly where this needs to be, and I can see my primers at the right depth. And just make sure after you've primed that you have inspected these just quickly to make sure the primers are facing the right way, because you do not want them to be facing the wrong way and then you completely ruin your whole shot on an important animal or something like that. So let's go through all 50 of these and then we'll move on to the next step. So this is where it starts to get to the point where you need to have a bit of knowledge about what you want to do, especially if you're doing this for the very first time. And that means doing research on powder for your particular caliber, making sure that once you've chosen that powder, you can get a reliable supply of that powder. That is especially a problem in South Africa. Thankfully, Pt.3, which is a fantastic brand of gunpowder, is very easily available here. So for the 300 Winchester Short Magnum, I've chosen Pt.3 N560. It's well known to be a fantastic choice for this cartridge, and allows me to get really good velocities and good consistency, good temperature stability. Just a fantastic powder. So I'm going to be filling up the Lyman Gen 6, which is an auto powder dispenser with the gunpowder. There are other automatic dispensers available, like the RCBS Charge Master and some more expensive options. And of course, there's also the option of just weighing it out by hand or using like an analog scale. I just found that this is so quick and easy, and it allows me to dispense powder while I'm doing other things. And obviously I need to fine tune if the charge throws out a bit under or a bit over, but the bulk of the dispensing of the powder is done automatically, which is fantastic. So one tip with something like this, switch it on and leave it for a good few hours. I found that it kind of settles after a few hours. I don't know if electronics heat up or whatever, but if you just switch it on and start going, it can drift. In other words, you might find that it starts measuring 0.1 grain higher than what it's supposed to, or 0.1 grain lower, and if you leave it for a while, it tends to kind of settle down. So that is one tip I would have for something like this. But we're going to go ahead and put all of this in here. 300 WSM is a hungry cartridge. And then there's a couple options for trickling powder. In other words, making up the overthrow, underthrow. One of them is using a proper powder trickler like this, which you can rotate to dispense little bits of powder at a time. The problem with the powder trickler though is I found it can be sometimes difficult to control. So I actually like to put this lid up here, put a few granules of powder on top, and just use my hands to pick up a couple at a time and just drop them in. Your hands need to be dry for this. You don't want to get moisture or sweat on the granules of powder, but I've never had any issues doing this, and I find I have better control, but each to his own. You're gonna need a funnel, and we are going to select 63.3 grains of powder. We're going to select auto repeat, and I'm going to take off this little piece of plastic which is supposed to help control how it throws powder, but I've just found it slows it down and it doesn't actually make your powder charge any more accurate. So we're going to take that off and we're going to hit enter. And as you'll see, it's throwing out powder. It will take a while for a Magnum like this. So there it is, 63.2. So this is where a little bit of experience comes in. I know that I need just 3 granules of N560 to make up that extra 0.1 grain. And there you are, 63.3, and I can throw this in. Because it's on auto repeat, I can put on the next one, and we can move on. Now, one thing to note, you should calibrate your scale before you get going. I happen to have done this already beforehand, but always check that your scale is calibrated. If it's not, it could throw consistently high or consistently low, and you're going to have your velocity being different or dangerously high, which is obviously not a good thing. What you can do to save time, if you want, is while the machine is throwing powder, you can actually take out a few bullets in the meantime, 208 grain Hornady ELD-Ms in this case, and just plonk them in the cases so that when the time comes to seat them, you don't have to be scrambling around for ammo. So we've gone through the process of basically doing everything, and the very last step is to seat the bullets. And this is again where you're going to need to have some inside information on what your rifle likes and what is safe. Every chamber is a little bit different. Some throats in rifles are a bit deeper than others. The distance from the chamber to where the lands actually start, that's how deep your throat is, can be different from rifle to rifle. So you can't just take load data off the internet and use it. That is super dangerous to do, because if your bullet gets jammed into the lands, in other words, if you seat your bullet too long and it gets stuck in the rifling, a number of things can go wrong. Once that bullet's stuck, you can try to eject the cartridge and the bullet pulls out, you've got powder everywhere. Or even worse, you try to take a shot, and because that bullet is stuck in the rifling and doesn't have time to accelerate into the lands, it can create a pressure spark, and it can become quite dangerous. So especially if you're starting off, and especially if you're wanting to do something like hunting and you're not looking for like bench rest accuracy, you should have your bullet seated off the rifling. In other words, not touching the rifling at all. There's a number of ways that you can determine where your rifling is. One way is to have your case neck pretty loose so that a bullet just has enough friction to slide in and out with your, soft enough you can push the bullet in and out, and then actually have an empty case with a bullet in, chamber that case, and then eject it and see how long that bullet is. That'll tell you where your rifling is, and from there you can back it off. A normal distance is like 20 thousandths of an inch, although my rifles actually like more. I think this is 60 thousandths of an inch off the lands, and my 260 Remington is the same. I think it's 60 thousandths off the lands, and that's actually a very accurate way of doing it for me. But bottom line is, you don't want to be jamming these into the rifling. So you're going to have to figure that out for yourself. There's some really good information on the internet, on other YouTube channels. Panhandle Precision is a fantastic YouTube channel. I'll put a link down below. I learned a lot of my reloading stuff from them, and they're a wealth of information. One thing you definitely want to do at this point is just double check everything. In your case where you keep your ammunition, you should have a label with relevant information. And here I've got how many times these cases have been fired. In this case it's only 4 times, which is still very little. Primer you're using, the powder you're using, and the charge weight, the lot number of the powder you're using, the bullets you're using, the overall length of your cartridge. All of that stuff is really, really important, because yes, you can write it down on a notebook somewhere, but let's say you've got 2 different batches of loads that you're loading at the same time, and you put them in 2 different cases. Do you know, for a specific batch of ammo that you've loaded, do you know how many times that particular set of brass has been fired? You probably won't unless you've written it in that container. So keep that information in the container. And what you should also do straight off the bat is keep a dummy case. So here's a dummy case, no powder, no primer, but it tells me 76.3 millimeters is my overall length that I should be aiming for. So with that in mind, before we start to seat this ammo, we're going to make sure the seating die is tight. I'm actually going to back it off. This is something I always do. Back it off a little bit. Oh. And then I'm going to seat a bullet. I'm going to measure it, and I'm going to move it back in. So the length we're aiming for, we know 76.3 millimeters. You can never fully trust your die. You don't know if it's been bumped. You don't know if something has come a bit loose. So you always want to be safe and probably back it off a bit, seat a bullet, measure it, hope that it's a bit too long. It's easy to always seat it deeper. So that's what we're aiming for. Let's seat one and see where we are. Nice and smooth. Okay, we're at 77. So we're going to move it in a bit. $76.7. Another 10th thou in. I should actually have a calipers in inches if I'm going to be using thou. Okay, there you go. 76.4, almost there. That should be spot on. $76.3. So we are spot on, exactly the same as our dummy case. I know that that's the perfect jump to the lands for me to get good accuracy. And I know that these ELD-Ms are super consistent from base to ogive and the overall length. So I know that when I seat these and I measure the overall length, they should all be exactly the same. But you're going to want to confirm this at least a few times in a row. So we're going to do the next one and measure again. 76.3. When it comes to selecting a seating die, you've got a number of options. You can select a pretty basic seating die that doesn't have the micrometer. My advice to you would be, firstly, to get one with the spring-loaded guide. You won't see it here, but there's a spring-loaded piece in here which essentially takes the shape of the cartridge and guides the bullet into the seating stem. And the other thing I would recommend is to go with a brand that can make a good seating stem. So Wooden Gunworks, which is the die I'm using, they've got a seating stem for VLD bullets, or bullets like this with a very long ogive, and the seating stem is the right angle that it can grip that ogive correctly and push it in. If you buy a cheap seating die that doesn't have a good seating stem, you can find that you create rings on your bullets from putting force where it doesn't belong. I won't tell you which die brands are best, but what you should be doing is taking a concentricity gauge like the one I have here and putting your bullets on the concentricity gauge, or your whole cartridge on the concentricity gauge, and actually rolling them and making sure that the bullets aren't being seated skew. That's very important. And one thing you should always do before you put these cases away is just to do an inspection again. Make sure the primers are all facing the right direction. Make sure that when you shake them, you can hear powder, or at least you can feel that they're charged correctly. Because if they're not, and you've only got a primer and a bullet, your firing pin's going to hit that primer, it's going to go off, and it's going to jam bullet in your barrel, and good luck getting that bullet out the barrel. But let's go through, let's seat all of these. You don't want to do this quickly. You want to be slow, you want to feel every step of the way, particularly for the early stage, because your bullet, as you can see, is not straight going into the die. As it goes in, it will align, you'll feel it engage, and then you can start pushing slowly until it's properly seated. If you want more information about the load development part, I haven't done a ton of videos on load development, but in some of my Oxwagon Diaries videos, I believe in part 11, we discuss load development a little bit and barrel cleaning procedures, if any. And we also have a video that I filmed probably 4 years ago when I first got my 260 Remington, running through how you do an optimal charge weight test. Some people do ladder tests, some people do OCW tests. There's a few ways of harmonically tuning your loads. If you want a good starting point for your loads, you can look at reloading manuals. I found they're normally pretty far off or pretty conservative. If you can get hold of a program like Quick Load, you should try and make use of that. I found Quick Load to be very, very useful in giving you a starting thumbsuck load that you can work around when working up a load for your rifle. Because what's the point of reloading if you can't get the best out of your accuracy? I guess it's a cost saver, but when you have to buy all of this equipment and spend all this time, you probably want it to be more than just a cost saver. You want it to be something that improves your precision. Well, that's a wrap on the reloading series. I thought it would take more episodes, but I think knocking out a few stages in one go is probably better than making you wait years for the series to roll on. That was a good day's work. 22 to 50 done, 260 Remington done, 300 WSM done. That's my monkeys, long-range baboons, and big kudus or whatever it may be. Well-rounded collection of cartridges. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this taught you something. I know it wasn't a complete, concise overview of everything that reloading has to offer, but the truth is that this is the kind of hobby or interest that could keep you learning for the rest of your life. There's always something more to learn. We're continually evolving in what this equipment can do and what we're learning about accuracy and precision. There are so many different schools of thought, and there isn't necessarily one school of thought that's better than anyone else's. So my advice would be to go out, research these things for yourself, learn from your own experiences, and learn from people who've been there and done that. As I said, Panhandle Precision is a fantastic channel. There's a few others out there that I would strongly recommend. Mark Ripley, although he doesn't show too much reloading, he shows what these cartridges can do. Look at 260 Rips on YouTube, and I hope you enjoyed the series. Thanks for watching. See you next time.